We are the nerds. We are the nerds of the apocalypse.
All right, I'm Adam Cozart. I'm an illustrator and comic book artist. Is there anybody else out here actively seeking an art job or trying to go that direction? Anybody drawing? You? Anybody? No? All right, over here. The ones that are too shy to speak up. That's okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about my mistakes, how I got started, what's worked for me and worked quickly, and then a little bit of my journey, and then I'm going to show you the project I'm working on now. I've got my tablet up here to keep me focused because I'll get distracted easily, especially by Spider-Man suits. But anyway, I started drawing when I was a kid in middle school. And I decided from that point, I think it was the Michael Keaton Batman movie. It came out, I collected comics, I was going to be a comic book artist. That was going to be my life, period. And it was going to be nothing but fun. And I gave up. I ignored schoolwork. I ignored everything to draw. I got decent at it. I got good. And in my senior year in high school, I got my father helped me take out a loan, and I bought out a comic book store. I had an employee. I suspect him stealing from me. I actually dropped school to run this comic book store. These are all bad things. These are all mistakes and set me on a backward path. I ran the comic book store. During that time, another comic book store opened. We successfully, a little over a year, put each other out of business. So then I was back to square one. I went back, got my GED. I got a job as a graphic designer doing Afghans and tapestries, which so far this sounds like my road's perfect. Art jobs are hard. They're the first, art departments are the first ones to get laid off, especially in textile companies and stuff like that. So I got laid off. Drawing was my only skill. It's not easy to get another art job until you've taken time to establish yourself. And I hadn't done that. I basically got lucky right out of high school, and now that luck was over, and I had to face real world. So I tried drawing for a while, couldn't get a job. I did odd things, roofing, different things. So I basically gave up on drawing for a while. I realized that this isn't because I was submitting stuff into Marvel and DC. The problem was my stuff was good, but not spectacular. It wasn't Jim Lee level. It wasn't these levels that you need to be fully competitive at the time. It was just good. It was a lot of white noise at the time. So I went a different direction. I went into law enforcement, military. I'm actually a K-9 officer now. So I quit drawing for a long time, and I decided to get back into it with a different perspective. I went back into it again, trying to warm myself back up. I got hold of it again, and I was drawing again, and I was put myself on a level that I needed to be, professional level, and that's stressful. Everything had to be perfect. I had to match these other artists, otherwise I was wasting my time. So it was extremely stressful, to the point that my wife actually set up an art studio for me in the basement of my brother-in-law's house so I would just be away from them, because it was extremely stressful. After a while, I stopped drawing again for a little bit. I had to take a break. And then those who draw know you have a desire to draw. You want to draw. It pulls you. So I started thinking about it and thinking of other options, of other things I enjoy. And then it hit me, there's other jobs out there besides comic books. There's children's books illustrations. There's things that you can draw relaxed and fun and not be stressed. Panel work in comics is the hardest thing in art to do. You can do pinup drawings, beautiful, because you're doing one pose. You can do, any other type of art is easy, but when you start storytelling with panel art, you just went to the hardest thing. And when you're trying to do artwork, and you're just starting in, even as a kid coming in, you're skipping all these other things and going straight to the hardest. You're going to the last level. So there's other things out there. There's other jobs that could build you up to comic book art before you get there. So I started looking at things I enjoyed. I started looking at the cartoons. I'm a big fan of Butch Hartman, the Danny Phantom, stuff like that. I'm a big fan of Teen Titans Go. And I started paying attention, looking at them, and none of the perspective was correct. and I'm still enjoying this. The drawing was simple. It's cartoony. It's fun. The expressions were better. The storytelling, as far as when someone was angry, they were able to put more expressions on a face in a cartoony style. The perspective was just fun. So I started trying to mix that into a comic book art style, trying to still hold on to some of the comic book feel, something that could still be used so it wasn't completely cartoony, but trying to mix that in. And then Bruce Timm was a big inspiration to me. He took Batman, he made it simple, cartoony, and could tell dark stories that entertained adults and children. So when I started looking at that, I spent probably a year playing, trying to make a style that was different, to design something that was not too cartoony because I didn't want things to look Disney, something that could be in the comic book market. So after I felt like I had something stable, I opened the Instagram account and it got a good reaction. And since then, I opened the Instagram account actually, I think it was Valentine's Day of last year. It's about a year and a half ago. And since then, I've been offered work. I haven't looked for work. I'm offered more work than I can do now, because I came up with an original style that it kind of went against the white noise. I'm getting offered more work than from people who have a whole lot more talent than me. They're doing the perfect cars. They're doing the perfect perspective, stuff I struggle with because I created an art that's just entertaining. It's kind of like you're so focused on the detail of the trees, you skip the art of the forest. And that's what it comes down to. You're so worried about, I've seen art that has beautiful muscle detail, like the cross-hatching and everything, but the body's all out of whack. Artists go in thinking too much about the detail first instead of the form. Now that being said, the reason that I was able to go to cartoony is because I'd studied drawing so much. You cannot, if you go to, as young guys, kids, if you go into cartoony drawing thinking that's simple, your cartoony drawings won't look good unless you understand the anatomy and everything else. So there's a difference between like practice drawing you don't let people see, and then like drawing you do out. Like practice drawing, I'll go home and I'll just trace stuff just to get muscle memory lines in my mind. That way it'll translate to the cartoony stuff without me even knowing it. You just have that understanding of it. So you don't want to use cartoon drawing as a crutch. But anyway, so after Instagram, I got my first real comic book job with Quran Comics. They're out of San Diego. They're starting off. We started off with Skyland. It's on Comixology and stuff now. It's a good comic if you're interested on how I developed, because at the time that I got that, I had just got a tablet, and that changed everything. This tablet, and I got a free app, and I do all my artwork on a free app on a tablet, and that changed everything. So going into comic books, I thought this was it. This was great, and then I realized what deadlines meant. So the fun started sucking a little bit out of it then. And then, of course, going into it, you start making promises you can't keep, because you think, well, I can finish this page in this amount of hours, so I have this amount of hours on this day. So if the world was perfect, you would have that amount of hours. But a lot of times you don't. So you start falling behind, and you overstress yourself, and you put yourself too far out there. And that's a huge lesson to learn. But anyway, I kind of broke things with Quran a little bit. We were going two separate directions. Where I am with my life, everything has to be on my terms because I already have a career. I'm not going to stress myself over something when it's not going to give me better than what I have now. So that brings me to the project I'm working on now. And the project I'm working on now is I got contacted by Thomas Cantley. I don't know if any of you are familiar with him. He is a cancer survivor. He got testicular cancer. So he was homeless in New York when he got it. He was a photographer down on his luck. He was homeless in New York. He didn't go get checked out. He ended up being in late stages of it. And after he was a survivor of that, he decided to dedicate his life to testicular cancer awareness. So he actually blew up an inflatable ball is 6 foot taller than he is, and he rolled it across America. He's been in Men's Health. He's been on dozens of talk shows. He's actually got a documentary coming out, I think, next month or the month after. So he contacted me and wanted to do a comic of him. He's actually branded by the name Mr. Ballsy. So he rolled his huge ball that he got signed. You can YouTube him, you can look him up. And he got that ball signed everywhere. The ball's name's Lefty. And so he called me up and wanted to do a comic book version of that, making him and Lefty a superhero. So it grew from there. We've are launching the digital release first in November, the first episode of it, and then the second episode, and it'll be January when the actual book will start going to print. It's going to have a lot of backing. We have a lot of investors and sponsors looking at it. And so from that, we've already laid out the plan to grow for breast cancer, for children's cancer, leukemia, different characters for different cancer. So I'm going to show you the cover. This is the cover, and this will show you the art style for those who haven't been to my table, and kind of clarify what we're doing. Of course, this is some of the color kind of muted out. This is his dog Vader, who went on his adventure across the nation with him. This is representing Thomas Cantley, and then Lefty, and this is some other characters who are in the book. Anyway, this, as you can see, style's cartoony. There's things I took from different cartoony artists to develop style. The idea of round eyes came from Family Guy. A lot of my emotion in the eyes comes from Family Guy. I mean, little things. Sean Galloway was a big influence on me, just on different things. But World of Warcraft, little details about little swirls and stuff, or just little tiny things. You don't want to copy people's art. I see a lot of artists who do good art and they're copying David Finch or some artist that's out there. You did not create your own art. You just copied somebody else's. And these companies look at that. They want to see something unique. They want to see something original, something entertaining. I've actually went back and drawn some of this stuff the way I used to on basic comic book style. It didn't entertain me nearly as much. And that's just one avenue. But anyway, that's coming out soon. Any questions so far? About anything? The project? Anything? Yes. I use Medibang paint. I think it's free. If it's not, it's only a few dollars. I got the iPad Pro and the Apple Pencil. I love that. I think the Apple Pencil works better than some of the more expensive art tablets. I've used Procreate and some of the others, but I can't get a hold of them as good as Medibang. Medibang matches Photoshop the closest on drawing levels and coloring and stuff. Anybody else have a question? Yes. Butch Hartman. I have not met him. Have you? No. I met Sean Galloway at Heroes Convention. Big moment. I'm a huge fan of Sean Galloway stuff. And yes. How to progress? Practice art. Like I said, practice and what you show. I wouldn't show anybody my art until it was where I wanted it, as far as like the Instagram account stuff. And even now, I'll post stuff on Instagram and I'll take it off like an hour later. I'll look at it like, no, that's messing up my gallery. So, but the biggest thing is decide what direction you want to go. You have artists like Mike Mignola, who he drew actually normal comic book style before, and now he draws Hellboy and stuff, and he's very stylistic, and he never really got the attention until he created that style. Decide what direction you want to go. If you want to go lighthearted, cartoony, if you want to go dark, if you want to go classic comic book superhero, decide what direction. And I went several different directions. For one, I would look at different artists and pull different things just to see how they did it, because there's techniques they use. Two, I would draw realistic things all the time. You never know where they'll fit in, because if you're drawing an alien or a werewolf. Well, if you've never drawn like how a real wolf snarls or insects, those things will stick in your mind, and those are tools you'll actually use for drawing later. Draw things you don't like when you're practicing. And then when you're like, I'll draw when I'm doing like a city scene. If I'm doing it for production, I'm doing it for entertainment. I'm doing what I know I can do and I can make look good. And I'm choosing the angles and I'm choosing everything that I know will look good. And that's what you want to do for your presentation. But don't do that with your practice. That's where a lot of kids and stuff screw up on practice, because they're only drawing what they know they can look good. You need to be drawing what you can't make look good, and the perspectives and city streets and all the stuff you can't make look good. That way all those little things stick with you, and when you're actually doing the production stuff, it'll translate over. Tracing, I do trace all the time when I'm just practicing. If you get tired sometimes, don't want to draw, and you need to practice some. So I have tracing paper. Sometimes I'll put it on the screen, and all I'm doing is learning lines. You cannot draw something out of memory unless you've actually dedicated it to memory. You can't draw, what a car wheel looks like unless you've actually, put those lines in your head to think about that. And even drawing really, really simple cartoony stuff, that stuff translates. Contour drawing helps me too. Contour drawing is where you just don't look at your paper. You sit there and you look at like a light post, and you sit there and just draw the lines of the light post. Does not matter what's on the paper. You're training your mind, you're not creating art. So you're actually just looking at the details of how screws fit into this, and all that stuff starts sinking in and starts sticking. And all that will translate into cartoony stuff. Every cartoonist can draw realistic. They're not using cartoon drawing as a crutch. But good question. Anybody else have a question? Yes. Awesome. Yeah, I'm surprised I have a good reaction on it. Do you draw too, or?
Yeah, I go by.
Oh yeah. Kind of anime. Am I thinking right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Anime girls and stuff.
Yeah, actually,
I do.
We're not.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I do remember you. You have good art. That's good. We'll bring you up here to help.
But my question was like, what advice would you, I guess give someone, who's in social media presence, look at your art and like your followers are amazing. You had mentioned the thing about spending so much time on small details, and I guess I'm more or less just trying to figure out like how can I help grow my family.
That's like a whole nother panel. With Instagram was where I decided I was going to market myself, and for an artist, it's done really, really well. I did a bunch of things going in. I dedicated, and another thing, like going into it. This will sidetrack, but I'll come back. Going into art. You hear a lot of artists who condemn drawing for exposure because people take advantage of that. When I started drawing, and I'm still coming out of that phase, I considered my first couple of years was going to be like a college phase. People pay to go to college, and they're not getting paid for the experience. So I don't draw for exposure. I decided I was going in drawing for experience. And I decided I was going to treat like the first year like college. So like the Skyline book, I did for almost nothing. Some pages I did for nothing, because I wanted to work with other artists. I wanted to work with other writers. I consider that my college. And now I have a book published, and they were grateful because they were able to put money back in the company. So I did a lot of art for free and commissions for free on Instagram. So I did art for people like crazy on Instagram for free. Actually, when I first started, I first offered commission work on Instagram for people, and it was not only free, but I would pay shipping and handling. That lasted about a week before I had to stop, because it was like Australia, the UK, and I was like $30 shipping, and I was like, okay, all right, that's a bad idea. But going back to Instagram, everything I've been offered is from Instagram. I've been offered coloring backgrounds on cartoon jobs, things I couldn't take because they were short term. It was something that I couldn't invest that amount of time and keep my day job type thing. So when I got onto Instagram, I socialized with everyone. I went and I liked people's stuff. I talked to people. I did drawings. Cosplayers are a big part of the comic book community. I would draw pictures of cosplayers in their costumes. They would like it. They would post it. Then that would feed more to me. It would help them. I did that a lot of other people's characters. I did a lot of drawing. Most of my drawing early on was of cosplayers and other artist characters and stuff, just networking. All I was doing was networking. And I spent like the first year, I mean, every waking moment I was on Instagram, like it was ridiculous, but it paid off. Quran Comics, when they were originally Malevolent Comics, you know, if I saw an independent comic company, I was talking to them saying, I'm really looking forward to just socializing and networking. I've had communications with huge actors and like people that I couldn't believe were even like communicating back and forth. And a lot of that, another point is perception is reality. The reason I take down stuff off my art is people look at my Instagram and they think I'm a whole lot more professional than what I am. I've only been in this a year and a half. I've only got small jobs because I have another career. But people are like, I know you get these messages all the time and stuff like, no, I don't. Or, I mean, just being invited to talk on this panel alone, I'm unworthy, fully. But what I'm doing now is I was offered to speak on this panel. What I'm doing now is working. Your stuff, I don't know. I mean, you've got great stuff. All I can say is like, not just draw, because you're drawing more game stuff in anime. Is it?
Yeah.
More.
A lot of what I draw is based off of like fighting games.
Yeah. I would branch out. Like when I was on Instagram starting off, every time a movie dropped, I was drawing that movie character. Whatever was hot at the moment. If somebody was big in the news or someone passed away, I was doing either a tribute or something to that character. I was drawing, Prince or whatever was big that people because the comic book market's only so big, but the Instagram is huge. So when you draw characters that are outside of this realm, then you're pulling people who normally don't in comics and everything else. So a good section of my followers are not even interested in comics. They just like cool stuff. But they don't find you on their own. You've got to go out and like network and pull them in. But once you pull them in, it's great. Because like if I hold an art challenge or something, I know about 100 people are going to get involved in it right off the bat. And it's good to have that connection with people and that networking. And there's so much that's happened off networking. 30 people have come up saying they've known me off Instagram just here. I haven't had that luck on Facebook and other social medias, but Instagram for artists is huge. Any other? Yes.
What is your schedule? Like how much
Draw time?
Yeah.
Is stupid. I was miserable drawing with Quran, with Skyland at certain points. I'll admit that it was heavy. I was overpromising what I couldn't handle. I was drawing on vacation and stuff because I have 2 kids. I actually homeschool at home, full-time job. I mean, it's ridiculous. I was drawing. I was sitting down on every day off, and it was 10 or 12-hour days drawing. Again, that's something I can do in short terms. I learned to set short goals, like I'm going to finish this, and then there's going to be a break. And I've learned to, if I tell somebody a deadline of when it's going to happen or when I can get it done, I go ahead and schedule those breaks into that. I used to not do that. I said, well, I could get it done in this. No, you've got to schedule the time in. When you're doing your own stuff, this is different because like I was with Quran, they scripted out. I'm having to interpret what they're doing. I did a lot of the character design or all the character design and concept, but they're still scripting it. So they're, if you open the doors and there's this huge city and intricate detail and stuff, they're forcing me to draw things that, I know is time consuming. I can, when you're in control of the camera, it changes things. Like when I'm doing my own stuff, I can do camera angles and stuff and still tell the same story, but until I got the time or I'm ready to take on vast scenery drawings, I can shortcut it. There's things that and still make the page entertaining, dynamic. When I do these pages now, I actually I lay them out real quick. I actually do the word bubbles first. Let me see. I can pull up if you can see from here. I think I have, but I'll actually do the word bubbles first. I know where everything's laid out. That saves me time drawing. I'm not wasting time getting real detailed over here when a big word bubble is going to cover it all. So that helped me a whole lot. Let me see if I can find. I don't see it now, but anyway, here I'll do this. Like here's a simple page talking of Mr. Ballsy. There's things you can do. I use like geometric shapes on the background. I clean it up. The story's still told. He's on the city street. The attention is on the characters, and it's shortcutted. There's a lot of things I do to shortcut to make it still eye-popping with the color. I think that's just different things. I use. I'm still working on the color. The color to me is part of the art style. I use a cartoony drawing style, but the coloring to me is just as important. You got to pick what direction you want to go with coloring, and I'm trying to go more pinks, purples, oranges, colors not normally used, and more just eye-popping. That's what I aim at. But yeah.
Like now,
Uh-huh.
how many hours a week do you work on a picture?
Yeah. Trying to think. My weeks, of course, in law enforcement, my weeks are scattered everywhere anyway. I work 2 weeks days and 2 weeks nights. So the weeks I work nights, I usually get up around 11, and then I don't go in till 6. So I'll get maybe 4 or 5 hours if I'm capable of, depending on the night before. It's hard for me to put an hour on the week. I know I can get a page done in a day. So what I'll do now is I will decide what days I have off, and I will decide on these days I can get a page done. So the days that I'm working, what I do is whatever I can get ahead of on those pages to make that day easier, I do that. And usually if I stick to that routine, I stay ahead of schedule with it. Like because it's hard to start a page knowing, like if you only have an hour to draw, it's hard to start a page when you know you're not going to get much done with it. But if I know like this is Wednesday's page has to be done on Wednesday. Well, if I know Monday I got an hour open, all I'm doing is saving some time on Wednesday. So Wednesday's the day of the day, but I'm kind of getting a little ahead of the game. I've learned that doing that helps me a whole lot, and then try to work in other things as I go. But you have a question? You look like you have a question. Oh, I was looking at you. Anybody else have a question? What about you? You haven't said anything. You're a shy artist. Nothing? What do you like to draw? Uh-huh. Have you played with animation any? Have you? What do you use for animation? Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah, I've started. Animation is time consuming. I've played with it some. I hadn't been able to do much. Are you wanting to do animation? Is that what you're wanting to do? Uh-huh. That's the dream? Oh, sweet, sweet. You have any questions? Anything? Yeah, like I say, it has to develop. You have to pull from here. And there's little things, little details, like even the shape of his ear. If you go on my Instagram, the shape of their ears are changing. You basically find overall what you like, and then you just keep tweaking it from there. The next thing I'm going to be tweaking, I like the cartooniness of the cankles, the wide legs. What that goes down to is undefined feet. That'll be the next thing you'll see my art changing a little bit. But I pick one thing at a time, and I don't let it. Again, when I go back to when I practice art, I'll experiment. When I'm doing normal art, I stick with what I'm good at. So like things like their feet or whatever will stay the same until my practice art tweaks it out, and then it'll translate over. But there, see that. But yeah, well, with animation, that's a whole different ball field. I guess you're doing somebody else's style if you're doing Disney or something like that. But definitely, if those are thinking comic books, definitely think other things besides comic books. There's so many other things that you could get into and start making a portfolio and making a name for yourself instead of comics. And then if comics comes, it comes. But another thing I wanted to say, there we are. When I talking about leaving school and stuff for art, that was bad. If you are just drawing, you dedicate everything to drawing, you ignore everything else, then you are a pencil. You have no control over your life. Everybody else does. As an artist, your name is a brand. You are a brand. Your drawings is a product. Like that's what I thought in making the style is I'm making a product. I want a product to appeal to the largest group of people. I didn't want it to be Disney. I didn't want to appeal just to this side or this side. But I studied business. I listened to business books on tape or audio business books. That's a huge part of it too, a huge part of it, because your name is a brand. Marketing is hugely important. You're marketing yourself. That's a huge thing. There's so much more you need than to just be a pencil. Because if you're just a pencil, you're basically a factory worker working for somebody else, and you never get to be on the creative controlling end of your life. Any other questions? Let's see. And trying to look at my notes here, a lot of what went into my style was production time. I knew drawing detailed, I couldn't meet production time. This, I can do a page in a day. And when I do a page a day, that's a fully colored page a day. You're looking at, and that's one of the things with business, with some of the businesses I've worked with. When you have Marvel and DC, you have pencilers, inkers, colorists, letterers, writers. You've got all these jobs. So if you're thinking you're going to draw like Jim Lee or whatever and do a full color and it's just production time, you'll get one book out a year maybe if you're lucky. So if you're wanting to do everything, you almost have to streamline your art. You don't necessarily have to go cartoony, but you have to streamline it. And that's what played into making up my style. Let's see. I got American Idol on here. Just a example. Anybody watch American Idol before? Probably younger kids. It's probably dying out by time. One of the big things on American Idol was they were looking for artists. The winners were artists. They were people with unique styles. And art is art. Singing is art. Any performance, art. Drawing is art. They were not looking for people to replicate Garth Brooks or somebody if they were a country singer. They weren't looking for someone to duplicate, and they were the first ones to go, even though their singing may have been amazing. They were looking for artists. I'm trying to remember Adam, whatever, I can't remember their names now. When they came through, whether you liked their singing or not, they were unique. They were artists. They created their own path. That's a huge thing. The only other note I've got is like on colors. There's different things you can do with colors. One of the rules I use on colors is most of the time I try to go warm to cool on going back. I'll try to wash an atmosphere for warm colors in the front and cool colors in the back to give an illusion of something's in the foreground more in front. You can't always do that depending on what you're doing, But either way, I try to contrast. I don't know if there's any good examples on here. Yeah, well, again, this got a little orange in the printing of this from what it is on the screen, but he's up the forefront. I had an orange wash on him. It goes cooler as it goes back. This is these purple tentacles with the green. You can tell they're a little more reddish in the tone. If they were in the background, they'd be a little more purple. It depends on what you need, what you do. If you have a fire in the background, you're reversing that. But black on white contrast is a huge, huge thing on keeping eye popping on color. Any other questions? I'm running dry. Yes. When you're drawing on paper, what are you using to color? Just colored pencils? I always struggled with that. I'm always so much of a perfectionist. It's hard for me now to draw on paper, even with markers. I use an off-brand markers that work good. I can't remember what's the name of them. Do you know, Brandy? The name of the markers I use? I think they were like $30, weren't they? They were like $30 for like a package like this with every color. And they're what I'm using now because I can't invest in the Copic markers or the expensive ones that are like $7-8 a marker. But you can find them on Amazon. I would suggest the markers because they flow. Because color pencils drive me crazy because you got to sit there and grind to get out that rough texture. Coloring, usually on coloring for starting off, you start off with a light wash. Even with colored pencils, you start off with lighter colors on it, and then you start putting your shadow, you start putting darker colors on top. So you try not to, and that's just one technique, but that's what I would do starting off. Like on a skin tone, I would do a really light color that's going to be lighter than what their skin actually is, and then come in with a darker color and color in everything and only leave like spots of that light showing through that would be the highlights, and then come in with an even darker color and color in shadows, or with depending on your variety of colors and colored pencils, it's just how heavy you put your hand. but yeah, black and white, think contrast. Think of the color wheel, colors that are opposite, purple and orange, red and green, and try to contrast that color behind it as much as you can, or have that tint. Like if you have purple, there's different shades of purple. There's purples that have more of a red shade and purples that have more of a blue shade. Pick the shade that contrasts the color that's next to it. If you've got a blue here, don't pick a blue purple to put beside of it, because now you've kind of blurred it out. Pick a reddish colored purple, some contrast. And that's huge. And dark and light. If you got a dark color here, put a light color beside of it. As much as you can. You keep that in your head as you're going the whole time. And that helps a lot. And I use brighter colors up front. And I start, some of my pictures, I actually start taking away color until it's almost black and white, or just gray tones in the back, and let the colors start coming. The closer you get, the brighter the colors are. I use that. That helps a lot. Anything else? Well, I think that's about it for my time anyway. Unless any other questions? Nope. I enjoyed speaking to y'all. Thank you for listening. Thank you. I appreciate it.